every man has done the long shot strategy. The original shot didn't work. It didn't land right. Or you found out they had a boyfriend and you were like, look, you're worth waiting 3 years in the long weeds to see if I might get a goal later on down the line. And in some senses, like in the long weeds. And I think there's an element. There's an element of like. This is the Dope Black Dad podcast. My name is Marvyn Harrison, and today I am over the moon. We've got women on our show. Ooh. It's been a while since we have the more important and more urgent and more powerful gender on our show. We've been dealing with our challenges ourselves as men in our little corners, figuring out things. And today I really wanted to open this conversation. So about 3 weeks ago, me and Marvyn were having this conversation, right? Marvyn was talking about a Steve Harvey article which insinuated that men and women cannot be friends. He has no female friends. And it kind of harks back to this old era where men could only objectify women in such a way that the idea of not having a sexual relationship with them was mind-blowing. It was like, what do you mean? So we're not going to have sex? So what are we friends for? So it was always like a prelude to intimacy. Now we can talk about some of the inner workings of men and their approaches to how they manage their female relationships. But I felt I didn't want to have this conversation with just me and you. So I wanted to invite some really important people. So today we have Chia, who is a longtime friend and an amazing, how do I best explain? Because I was going to say a spiritual person, but then that's very simplified. How would that?
My title that I go by is creative activist / spiritual mentor.
That was way. See, I wasn't going to do you justice. I was going to make you sound like you're just someone who like meditates and prays. But now I feel like, as a creative activist, I feel I want to know more. But you will tell us more shortly. Now, tell us now.
Now, okay. Yeah. So I've had a background in the arts. So I've worked, been an actress, a dancer, writer, director, producer, all that. And I've worked with young people for the last 20 years, and then moved into working with the most at-risk kind of young people, working in the prisons, those in gangs, that sort of thing. But I've used the creativity as a form of rehabilitation. And then started, the more I started to care more about the work is the more that it became a bit more, my work has to have some form of activism behind it. And the most predominant thing that I've done is a play that I wrote, which was on girls in gangs, called The 40 Elephants. And that was my, we need to hear from the girls. Do you care about the daughters out there? And then as a spiritual mentor, I do have a couple gifts. I'm clairaudient, claircognizant. And I didn't know that I was like this. I just kept on tapping into young people, and they kept on saying, oh, miss, how do you know this? How do you know that? But as I developed on my spiritual journey is when I realized. And then I just wanted to create like a little bit of a practice where I could help people to tap in to themselves and have a better relationship with themselves. So the same way you have a spiritual mentor, it's the same way you have like a business mentor, or you might have a personal mentor or a therapist or whatever. Mine is like for your spirituality, so that you're always checking in with where you're at from that place. That's powerful. That's me in a nutshell.
Can I have your number afterwards? I want to hang out with you as well, just to be very clear.
Sure.
Send it over. And then we also have Romantha, who's a journalist and broadcaster based in South Africa, and you're also the founder of Dope Black Women South Africa. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
How are you?
How's everyone doing? I'm good. We're hanging on here in South Africa. It's freezing.
Can you contextualize freezing though? Because our freezing is like actually freezing, as in minus something, and your freezing is like 12 degrees.
No. We do reach the minus, and we do reach the zeros in the morning. We're not on the minus yet, but we're on the zeros and the ones in the morning. It's just where your car is frosted over.
Wow.
But yeah, we don't get snow. And yeah, it's not that great. It's not that amazing at the moment. But I'm doing amazing. Work is a little bit tricky because we're in a third wave here in South Africa, so we are extra careful, and our vaccination rollouts are just at a dead snail pace. So we're all just hanging on. It's the cold, it's the pandemic, it's everything.
Can you tell us more about your work and what you do?
So I am a field reporter for a national current affairs show here in South Africa. It is in Afrikaans, which is my mother tongue. I am also the community lead for Dope Black Women, and we launched officially in January this year. So we are sort of the baby group, one of the baby groups of Dope Black. And I am just so happy to be a part of the space in the community. And this is basically my first introduction to the broader community. So yeah, that's what I do. On the side, I really just enjoy my home. I'm very much a homebody. And then I'm also part of the Black Embassy, which is basically a physical space for us to do what all of our community spaces do. And we had a pop-up event recently, our very first one for the Dope Black family. And I'm very much excited to grow that as well, as soon as we get out of the third wave.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we have qualified people. We obviously know who Marvin is. He's, my arch nemesis, my voice destroyer. All these things, I think, there's a good yin and yang between us. And I think it can create a really healthy conversation. So I think even if we talk about, and I think it's important to even understand and just establish where we are. So I've noticed a shift in the energy, frequency, power of women, specifically Black women. And we have two here. Can you contextualize what you would say has shifted? And obviously, even remember from a South Africa perspective, where coloured is a concept as well. But can you contextualize the shift that you have seen or noticed? And if you can acknowledge what the driving force has been in that in the last 10, 15 years in terms of women and how they're standing in society and how they see the world and what they want for themselves.
Yes, you're right. There has been a massive shift and a huge change, I think, in the way that Black women are seeing themselves. I think that the narratives that we've had before, I'll talk more about here in the UK. I know it's been, across the world, but we have to talk about us here. I just think that, I guess maybe it's social media. I'm thinking that maybe it's a bit more social media, because I think for myself, I was deep on my spiritual journey by the time I was about 28, which is 2008. And I've always had the natural hair and was always into spiritual stuff and whatever, but it was a bit she's a bit weird. Or they used to put me in the Erykah Badu zone, like we were just a different set of Black women to other Black women. But I found that the rise of the social media and Black women starting to see more Black women across the world who embrace their hair, they embrace their body, they embrace their skin, and especially Americans that were we're Black and proud. I feel like women here started to recognize that, well, why are we not Black and proud? Yeah. Why do we shy away from saying, why am I Black and dope? Why are we afraid of saying that here? And I feel like the shift, it took a next level last year because of the pandemic, because everybody was focused in, because everybody, started to find their voice and stuff like that. They've just got a different energy now. And I think that the playing field's starting to even out a little bit, because obviously you're hearing more men's stories and stuff like that about how they're feeling. Women are having to accept that men have feelings. You've always had feelings. I don't know why women only understand it now, but these things is what's created the shift. And then on a spiritual level, on a deeper level, I've always believed in cycles of things. So as much as we as Black people, it has felt like we've been in this cycle of demise for ages, just dealing with the same stuff. It has to shift. I've always known it has to shift. It cannot stay the same. And I feel like something woke up a bit in our DNA. It was like we just woke up and was just like, wow, it feels heavy, but it don't feel as limited as it was before. There's things I can do. I can go out there and say this. I can create this. I can create that. Whereas 10 years ago, people would be afraid to even have created podcast.
And then can I just ask them, because I think, and I suppose I'm taking questions from other people and channeling it through me, but I do think it's an important question to understand, is that what's the gap between where you feel you are as a Black woman today, where you've come from, but then where you want to go to? Like, how big is that gap and how far are we away from true change? Because I think, I suppose men aren't necessarily invited in this progression and in the struggle per se. It's not, so they are invited, but it's not dependent on them. You're not waiting for men to facilitate this growth. And so I suppose most men look at it and don't really understand what it is that they're expected to be and do. And so maybe that creates a bit of disconnection and friction at times. But like, what is the gap between where you were, where you feel you are now, and then where you would like it to be? And I suppose, and very quickly, in terms of where you want it to be, is this the utopia version, or is this just like where it's acceptable? Like, that make sense?
To me, the gap. Okay, so I told you I've always kind of been who I am, but it was owning and accepting who I was and being okay that I may not fit the mold of everybody else. Because I think that that's a large part of women fitting into the molds of other women as you're getting older and then trying to establish who you are. So I don't think I was too far, but it was definitely lonely. And now it's not so lonely because more women have stepped up. More people understand my language, because more people want to own themselves, or maybe they're asking more questions like, Chia, how comes you're just so happy about ABCD, or how comes this doesn't bother you? So the communication has opened up. I personally, for me, it's healing. It's about healing. And the more that we heal and understand who we are individually, and that's why I do this spiritual mentoring, because I'm like, it's about your relationship with yourself. When you can get really clear on your relationship with yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your looks, how you feel about your hair, how you feel about your function, and how you have a set moral code for yourself, you know your place in the world. But I think previously to now, people didn't have that. They didn't have no connection to who they are. They just had a connection to this story of you were slaves. That's it. That is nothing else beyond that. And you have to stay with that narrative. In terms of moving towards the future, I don't think in my lifetime it's going to be utopia, but I'm very much aware that I am, especially working with young people, that I am part of the change for their legacy. And I think it's about whether people care about the fact that the big change might happen when we're not here. And so I think people get stuck in the fact of, oh, it's never going to happen now. So we'll just do a little bit. And we'll wait until we see 30 people are involved in it of my friends, and then I'll get involved in it rather than just leading on it for yourself.
Where are you at with it, Romantha? Like, and also, can you contextualize, from a coloured and black perspective in terms of what that may feel like and the shift? And obviously, like from South Africa, there's different challenges and there's different timelines. The country is very new. So can you contextualize that for us?
Okay, I'll contextualize coloured and blackness. These are all just forms that were ascribed to us, or races that were ascribed to us by the apartheid government. And so we were classified as colored because they couldn't quite place us. We were not black entirely, and we were also not white. In some cases, we were biracial. In other cases, we were just indigenous people. And so they couldn't place us, and therefore they made us colored. But there is this hierarchy that existed because colored people then, well, it's part of the divide and conquer tactic that the apartheid government used by giving us this other term. We are black, but we are used or classified as colored people. And so in doing so, they created this psychological divide, physical divide, geographical divide. They did, same as America, the paper bag test. They did pencil tests where they would put the pencil or pen in your hair. If it falls out, you're most likely not black. And so that's the kind of test that they did on us. They gave black people less benefits than they did colored people. And so the systemic oppression of black people more than they did colored people, although we are all black, created this extreme psychological trauma for black people, because there is a lot of healing for us to do. But at the same time, a lot of black people aspired to be colored or classified as colored. And there was this trick that the government played just to see how well their system works. They allowed us to reclassify. So let's say I was classified by birth as black, and I grow older and I just decide I want to be classified as colored. I can apply for that. And the psychological impact of that just made black people feel inferior. And the government told them that they are inferior. They paid them an inferior salary. They couldn't have jobs that colored people did. So that divide was financial, it was spatial, even the town planning. Black people would stay on the far outskirts and colored people would stay a little bit closer to the central city, and white people would. The hierarchies existed and it still exists today. So just a little bit of a background in terms of that, and how that relates to how we perceive ourselves and how men perceive us as women, we have come a long way in terms of Black men and colored men fetishizing colored women and vice versa. And so I think in that sense, we have grown. We identify and we see the toxicity of it all. We can see that we're being fetishized. Black women have come to realize that colored women also played a role in sort of supporting the system because we benefited from it. It's basically like the colorism chat, because colored people are usually a little bit lighter in complexion. They usually have the better, and quote, I literally say this in inverted commas, better hair, lighter complexion. And so yeah, in terms of that, we've really, really moved in terms of where we see ourselves. There's extremely a lot of healing that needs to be done between the two groups, especially women. In terms of men, women are now standing together and saying, I almost want to swear on this podcast.
Say
Am
it,
I
man.
allowed to?
Yeah, go for it with your whole chest.
Women are saying, fuck it, we can see right through it, and you need to address that. So as far as your fetishizing goes, are you with me for being with me, or is it just because I'm lighter? Are you being with me because you're trying to piss your family off because I'm Black? You know what I mean? So women are a lot more smarter in that sense. And then in the other sense, we've grown a lot more independent than our parents were, but it's not as advanced, I would say, as, for instance, European countries where women are entirely devoid from wanting to be a part of the patriarchy princess gang. And so here in South Africa, you still find a lot of that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist anywhere else, but you still find it very prominent here, that women advance the patriarchy here, that women have a problem standing together. It was actually so amazing to see what the Dope Black Women group has achieved here. And although we haven't done a lot in the last 4 months compared to our other communities, it just astonished me that we could stand together and we could speak about these sensitive topics on calls like this. And we could do it with respect, and we could try and heal together. So that's a seed that needs to be planted everywhere in all of the spaces that we go, that we still have centuries of divides to heal. I'm not quite sure if I answered your question. I just went off.
No. It's really, really useful.
Now.
What I think is interesting is that from my time in South Africa, it felt like you were a generation or two behind in terms of just empowerment, and not specifically for women, but just in terms of people, because the country is very, very young. You've come out of one generation, and for anyone who doesn't know, apartheid is probably the most sophisticated, oppressive experience I've ever known. Like the way they've broken down a country and kept them in particular things, like even seeing in townships that there are no trees and just little things like that. But then in the suburbs, in other parts of Johannesburg, it's like trees are everywhere and it's so beautiful and lush, and it's really interesting how they try to break people down. So I obviously respect the journey in which the country is going in, but it still has a lot of Western influence in terms of how men and women maybe interact, but also there's like a cultural aspect also in terms of like tribalism that informs how people interact. There was this whole breakdown of like the different tribes and what their men and women are like, and and how that impacts how tribes sort of mix. Can you share some of that? I don't want to, and also I don't want to speak languages really badly and say names wrong.
Let me also say that as a colored woman, I cannot sit here and speak for all Black women in South Africa. But I'm gathering from what you're saying is you're speaking about tribes and the stereotypes that they exist even within the tribes. That Xhosa women are very passionate, very aggressive, and as a colored woman, for instance, we are also very passionate and aggressive, and we love fiercely, and we're loyal, and all of the negative stereotypes are there as well. But we are also sometimes faced with a lot of I speak under correction. I don't want to call it tribalism, but it comes down to it, where people do ask what you are. I literally went to some club a while ago, and some guy came up to me and he was like, "What are you? Sorry, I'm so sorry, I can't place you. What are you?" And it turned into a big guessing game the whole evening. And I ended up not telling him because it really just doesn't matter. But that's the importance sometimes, that you see men attached to who women are. And we're saying, we'll tell you who we are. You're not going to tell us who we are based off of a race or a category that the government gave us. And so even in that, we are stepping into ourselves and saying, listen, if you don't see me for who I am, if you don't see me for my authentic self and for who I show up as, don't try and put me in a box. That's what we're saying.
I was just gonna, just off the back of what you were saying, sorry, it's hard when it's on here, isn't it? You get excited. Just off the back of what you were saying in terms of, you know, people asking, where are you from? We've had it here as well in terms of the exoticism. I don't know if that's the word of, you know, if you've got something else in you as a black woman, or describing every other denomination other than white as exotic, and we're just black. We're black women. Like, we're not exotic. Like, we're not from any exotic places. And I know growing up, a lot of guys said to me, "You're pretty for a dark skinned girl." I heard it a lot. Like, and it was a bit weird for me, to be fair, because I'm thinking, well, all my friends are dark skinned and we're all beautiful. What do you mean? And why are you making me feel like that? And then what it does is it makes other women feel a way about you because of how our men are feeling about us. But it all goes back to that programming that you said, goes all the way back to slavery, in terms of, did the black man see the black woman as worthy because of survival, from survival times, and then vice versa, and then also seeing that maybe the house lady, she got a little bit more, and so we need to I get what you mean in terms of the programming. I was just sharing that with you, that we have to break down that programming. It's a deep personal thing to move forward to that place of healing.
I do want us to get to the friends part, because I haven't even touched on that yet.
Yeah. Marvin, if you could just speak to the progression of men from your understanding. Obviously, when we speak, we talk about the things that we thought were possible versus what actually is possible now as a man, and how we are a lot more open and ready to be emotional, letting our children see us in our weaknesses. Like, how would you characterize our 15 years of shift for men?
For men, I think Chia made a good point just about, acknowledging that we have emotions. I think even men acknowledging that to be emotional isn't a beta male thing, or you're not a simp, or you're not weak. I think that's a big factor, because growing up we were taught that you needed to be strong, you needed to kind of always have your game face on, and so you weren't able to show weakness. So I think just understanding that we're human, that we have a story, that not everyone is 50 Cent, that not everyone is a world-class athlete or anything like that, but that we're normal, we have stories, we have emotions, we have experiences, and they're all valued. And, although you might not be someone's cup of tea, there are people out there that will resonate with you and what you have to share and your experiences. So I think for me, the progression for men is just more of accepting ourselves. Whereas before, it was a battle amongst us. Now you can see your brother, you can compliment your brother. Like, sometimes I see comments online like black men don't show one another love, and I just think that's foolishness, because I hug my boys when I see them. I'll tell them if they're looking good. We'll compliment one another and stuff like that, and that's just normal. It's not gay. It's not less masculine if you do that. But I think going back 15 years ago, you couldn't have done that. If you're the one guy doing that in your group, you might not be part of that group anymore. But now we've progressed to a point where we're willing to accept ourselves and accept one another, and understand that, it's just a bit more complex than it just being black and white, and we are set in stone and everyone's Arnold Schwarzenegger or like a Terminator style character. There's much more nuance with us. And so I think in the last 15 years, we've grown to accept and appreciate that, and acknowledging that everything we need is within us. We don't need to look outside for validation. If you love yourself, that's all you need to move forward.
I think what's really beautiful about that is that
I was about to say, go Marvin, because you speak in podcast language. You speak in bites. I was about to say,
oh, right. I've learned.
No, you're a pro at this.
There's the brother love. It's beautiful.
I think what's really beautiful about that is that I think in our spaces, in our male spaces, this is some of the first time, even for me, since it started in 2018, where on a consistent, ongoing basis, I've been able to have authentic conversation with men. There were so many men that I knew who we never were really honest with each other about anything. Or we might say, oh, I had a threesome and something really elaborate and like almost posturing, but we wouldn't sit there and be like, I struggle with something, or my mental health isn't great, or I struggle to be a dad. And so it always meant that nobody felt safe to say those things. So by normalizing those conversations, people just felt comfortable to say that out loud. But I think what's really interesting about what we're saying here is that there's an evolution into more of an emotional state for both of us, but owning authentically our state. And I say even emotional state, there's almost like a progression to the yin and the yang of like what men historically did, softening the edges of some of those things and broadening what's possible for them. And I think women stepping into their power in terms of work and social constructs and politics and law, all those things, the important spaces that define our countries and our world, stepping more into those places, irrespective of what men think or don't think, or whiteness think and doesn't think, has kind of created this more rounded. And actually, you could probably interchange any of us at any point and replace us with somebody else equally skilled, and the outcome wouldn't dramatically change. But I actually think the outcome probably would change, because my deepest belief is that women are probably better equipped for the balance of life than men are at this point. And in terms of the shift that's happening, men probably have more work to do because we haven't had to do that work ever. And now we do have to do it to basically survive in the way forward. We're quite far behind. And you can always tell when men try to reenact or act out in their lives and they get slapped back down with some of the things that they try to do, and they don't know an alternative route. They don't know how to apologize at times. They don't know how to just own, so my therapist says, like, you got to learn to take punches sometimes and just like accept. And women are really good at that when things happen, and that's not may not be a good thing. But if something happens, they don't feel like they have to immediately react in this dramatic way. They can hold it more. They've been taught that thing, and then actually you can come up with a more concise approach to what it is. Where for men, it seems at times it's quite reactive and just like almost my dick is bigger than your dick. So I think with those changes, how has the relationship part changed then between us all?
Before you move on, I just wanted to add, and I wanted to briefly add it because I think it summarizes where we as South African women have moved. So our parents, for instance, and their parents and the ones before them, the women were always the strong ones and the ones that held the household together. And so women always did it alone. Women were always the ones that made sure everything ran smoothly in the household. I, for instance, grew up with a matriarchal house. It was a grandmother, it was a mother, and there were no men in the house. So I grew up only knowing strong women in my life. And that speaks for the majority of South African women in the country. We also have a fatherless problem. So kids grow up without fathers, Black children specifically, 70% of them. And so women have always held it down here in South Africa. I think the newer generation where we are now is saying, if you're going to be in my life, what are you bringing? And if you're not going to be in my life and bring anything other than money, because we don't need it, we can go and work for ourselves, we can take care of the family as we've done for generations. If you're not coming here with some intellectual contribution, if you're not coming here with some emotional EQ, then what are you here for? If you're not going to be invested in my life and in the children's life, then I don't need you. So we are moving to a much more resilient and stronger woman, in terms of what we expect from our men. We expect more. And also gender-based violence is a big issue in South Africa. And so I think for us, we're saying, what are you doing to protect me? And what are you doing to protect women that you don't know? I think that's the more important one, because we're not easy to protect the women that they know and that they hold dear. But what are you doing about the women that you don't know? And so we are holding men a lot more accountable than our mothers and the ones before them did, because they just carried on with business as usual.
And so then in terms of like the dynamic of men and women and almost like, so I suppose the question about, having female friends, before that is the context is relationships and like, have you seen a relationship shift in more recent terms with that? Like how does coexistence in your world, in your friendship circles or in your personal life between men and women in a balance that, what we've just talked about, the context that's created? Anyone?
For me, I've maintained my friends. It was really important to me from a young age. My dad wasn't here, he'd moved back to the Caribbean. I didn't have any brothers. I didn't have lots of uncles. I had one uncle. I don't have a big family. It's not a big network. And I realized quite early on, I think, that there was a different respect that I was receiving, or a disrespect I was receiving because I didn't have that male figure around. You know, like guys were talking to me a certain way in the 90s, and I didn't like it. And I started to, I don't know if it was a conscious choice, but I started to value these male friends that were around, whether I grew up with them on the estate or I went to school. I started to value the energy that they brought in me because I realized that I'm in a mostly female home, and there's only so much that my mum and my sisters can do, but there's a difference in a male presence around you. Over the years, those friendships have developed into even deeper, you know, where I am friends with your wife. I am godmother to your children. We chill, we talk, we share. And I value that male energy because actually a lot of my male friends have represented a father energy to me at times. They've shown me a protective energy. It's all been platonic the whole way through because I just respect who they are. And I feel like they've always respected me. And now what we've got to, even though we didn't know we were doing that in the beginning, now we've got to a place where we realize, oh, you are a safe space for me always. And then I'm able to say, yeah, you was a safe space for me. That's what it was. It was about safe spaces. It was about, can I have a male friend that is supportive, encouraging, gives me good energy that I can talk to. Because remember, the advice you get from your male friends and the advice you get from your female friends, there's two different types of advice. Sometimes you can't go into all this emotional stuff. Sometimes you want your man friend to say, that sounds stupid. Yeah. No, you're not going to do that because that's not your thing. And that's a daddy energy, isn't it? When your dad says, no, we're not talking about that. And I get that, from some of my male friends. But like I said, more recently, it's safe space. And I think that we're learning what is a safe space that doesn't involve anything to do with sex. We should be able to manage those feelings. And sometimes, doesn't it come from admiration and stuff sometimes? So I realized this with working with young males, that yes, sometimes when I walked in certain sessions, initially they thought, oh, Miss is nice. But then it turned into respect. And then they realize, I just think Miss is cool. I just haven't met someone dope like her before. It's actually not all about all of these feelings. It's actually just because I respect her and I actually admire her. And taking young men through that process helps them to understand that it's not every woman you have to go and jump on. That doesn't make any sense. It's nice to have a good friend. And we need that masculine, feminine balance within ourselves and in our lives. My opinion.
Yeah. But then remember for you, like, if you're dating somebody, how do you introduce your male friends to the person you're dating? How long before you would do that? Would they have to formally be anointed as your boyfriend to do that? Anointed.
That's a beautiful word.
Okay, so let's start off with my experience with male friends. I have about a handful of male friends that I can say are genuinely my male friends. Ones that I haven't picked up any vibes. And I've lost so many male friends that I consider genuine confidants and genuine safe spaces, as you just said, Chia, merely because they couldn't keep that emotion under control. And it's so sad because they don't allow for a very beautiful friendship to flourish because they can't keep that emotion intact, or they can't check themselves in terms of what is it that I'm actually feeling. I know she's promised me friendship on 2 occasions. Friends or so-called friends of mine that are now no longer in my life tried to kiss me when I had some alcohol in my system. So you do have men that have the agenda. It's there, it's underlying, it's in their subconscious, and they're just waiting for the right moment to get you at your most vulnerable. And it's such a pity because I wish that more friendships ended up like yours, like the safe spaces where you can be like, you're a long time ride or die. I can go places with you. You could even be my groomsman or something of that nature. So in terms of relationships, I've realized that that's a big determinant for me. Like you mentioned earlier on, introducing your wife to a friend. if she acted weird, you knew there were vibes. And so sometimes you won't get those vibes if there are no variants in the space. So if I see you as a friend, it's just us and it's just our crew, I might never pick up that you like me unless I introduce a romantic partner. Yeah. And so you'll feel the energy shift, you'll feel the dynamic shift, you'll feel that they'll ask more questions, they'll pry, they'll try and place your person in a bad light. And I think we're old enough to see those signs. For me personally, that's a big test, introducing someone who's romantically involved with me into that space, just to see.
Yeah, I think.
So like I say, I have a handful, not more than 2-3 people that I know that I can introduce anyone to, and they would just be happy for me.
So just for the listeners, before we started recording, I was saying that, you know, when I knew I was going to get married, I had all my female friends that were around me, and I introduced them to my future wife, and I said, you know, just like hang out. I'd leave them somewhere when we're at an event together, and then just try to watch the dynamics and see how if it was healthy or not. Because for me, it was really important that the person that was around me wasn't secretly holding that type of feelings, and we're going to do sinister things, you know, while I wasn't looking, or would try and shoot their shot. But more importantly, just like I believe in villages. I believe in like interconnected relationships. When you build your family, you have a layer outside that should have your back in protecting your, you know, what you're building. And I think that's fundamentally important. And if you don't have the right people in, as soon as you find where the integrity of that circle is broken, you will then find lots of bad things start coming in through those spaces. And so it's really important to have that conversation, but also just to see and have with fresh eyes, like how people feel about each other, because you're trying to take on quite a big mission. And just very quickly, Marvin, so from your point of view, like, I'm going to throw you under the bus just a little bit, but out of, you know, all of your female friends, how many of them were possible people you would have dated versus like just, this is my friend? Because I have an awareness of this, but it'd be good to see what you think.
Yeah, do you know what? Funny enough, I was thinking about this like on the lead up to this podcast, because I think a lot of it is defined by your childhood. And so I went to, as my secondary school, I went to an all boys school. So naturally, in terms of proximity, a lot of my friends were male friends, and some of my male friends that I have now, I've had since I was like, you know, in nursery. I've had them from like 5 years old. So I found from school onwards, being friends with a female was a much more conscious decision. It wasn't as though I'm in a class of 30 people and 15 of them are female. It was all my friends are male. And then people I interacted with outside of school, and then when you get to college, it's much more selective. And I think then you start thinking about why you're selecting that person. Is it because you're attracted to them? Is it because you add value to one another's life? Is it because you're part of the same friendship networks, etc.? And so I think as that's progressed, and as I look on now I'm more conscious of choosing friends and establishing friendships where there's that mutual benefit in one another's life. Whereas when I was younger, you're choosing the girl that you like, essentially. Like when you're in school, when you're in college, it's a person you're attracted to. And then you're often goaded by your friends as well. Like, even if you did think of her as a friend, if your boys are in your ear saying, oh man, like, she likes you, why don't you try something? Then that can influence you and kind of dictate your behavior. But for me personally, as I've gotten older, it's been a much more conscious decision, thinking that, do you know what? I can add value in someone's life. They can add value in my life. And there's so much more than just pursuing someone in a sexual way or pursuing someone in a purely, you know, kind of egotistical way. But you can be a platonic friend with someone. And as Chia said, you know, that person could be the godmother of your child. That person could be a close friend. That person, as Romantha was saying, could be part of your wife's bridal party when it comes down to it. And overall, there's such a much more positive, you know, net value that they add. Whereas people that I've known romantically, I couldn't tell you what they're doing now. I don't know them anymore. Like, you know, you might have known them back then, but now you've forgotten about them and you've forgotten about one another.
That's the thing, Martin.
Yeah.
Marvin. I was about to say, Marvin, that's the thing. They ruin these beautiful friendships.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can't get it back. There's just no way that you can go back to a relationship where someone said, I think I might have feelings for you now. And from the get-go, our agreement was we were going to be friends. Even when things started getting a little weird, we made it clear. And so I actually have a question. How do you deal with friendships that have now taken on some weird energy that you can't place it?
Can I answer?
How do you deal with that? How do you can't place it? You just don't know. Are you flirting with me? Are you not?
Do you know what?
Really fun.
I don't know.
My it's changed. And, just to say as well with you, Marvin, I got what you said because I went to a girls' school. I never looked at that as a factor as well in terms of how you're making your acquaintances with the opposite sex if your school is female. But in terms of what you said, Romantha, because obviously it's not, I didn't say it's all been roses, but obviously was invited on here. So I'm talking about the positive connections. But no, there has been some awkward moments with people, and it's changed. My reaction has changed in my 20s, changed in my 30s, changed in my 40s. And we talked earlier on about, emotional IQ, and I realized that some people, their emotional intelligence or in reading the room was not the same as the way that I can possibly read the room. And I know that I'm also quite an individual in the sense of I have my own moralistic code. It's as simple as that. You break the code, I'm gonna shame you and pepper you and tell you about the fact that you broke the code. But I don't sever things. Does that make sense? Because I know that it's a growth spurt. And so for me, sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm gonna show you. Yeah, there ain't nothing gonna go on here, but I'm gonna show you that I love you unconditionally.
Sis, I did that.
I felt that you lead right in.
You know what I'll say to you, Romantha? Do you know what I'll say, Romantha? Because you mentioned something. You said that, maybe there's been occasions, you were out here and you had a little bit, you was maybe a little bit tipsy, you had a little drink, whatever. So that's a no-no. So certain situations and environments, it's just not happening. So, and I knew that from quite young because I used to watch guys because I'm quite, I guess, I don't want to say a together person, but I was always mindful of where I drink and do stuff. My first boyfriend was very much of this person's watching you to see if this, that, and the other. So from very young, I was very perceptive of being in spaces with men and what they might be thinking about whether my mask is dropping or whatever it is like that. And that what they might be thinking. So certain environments and spaces, no. It can't happen. But now that I'm moving into my 40s and we've had certain conversations and then, they've met people and broke up with people and we're talking and blah, blah, blah. It's now actually just become a thing of the past and a bit of a growth spurt. I don't know what it would be like now because I'm not expecting any of my 40-year-old friends to come because I'd just be looking at them like to say, bruv, what's been happening for the last 20 years? Where are we going with this? Unless it was a genuine feeling. I mean, I don't know. Romantha, some people might have secretly been really deeply in love with you and maybe thought that you are.
We're all amazing people. We're nice people with clean hearts and
you're a beautiful woman.
Sometimes you just got to say it. And also, I think this idea about you ruined a friendship. Who said we were friends in the first place? I was waiting.
Yeah. That's by your definition.
I was a lion. And that's what I mean by it's you're just ignoring the fact that I had a plan. I had a goal. You didn't have a goal. You were like, let's just hang out and talk about my other guy problems and my future and the challenges that I have. That level of attention is reserved for important people that I one day want to wake up and look at in the morning. So, where does that line even get created?
I was going to say, Marvin, I think on that point, a good kind of stress test.
Marvin, you just mentioned something. You said that level of attention is reserved for what?
Yes, for people that I want to wake up in the morning with. I can't remember what I said. I was on a rant. It was a monologue. I don't remember.
He was in the zone then, Romantha. He triggered. He was ready to trigger.
Go on, Marvin. So Romantha's stopping us to highlight things that she doesn't need to highlight.
I think on Romantha's point, I think Marvin he dropped a gem there, and I think one of the things you can do is watch how they treat other women. Because you might think, as Marvin said, you might think he's your friend. But if you're the only female that he regards in that way, you're the only female he's buying gifts or, things like that, then there's something there that you can check to wonder why, okay, maybe I am your best friend, I'm your female best friend or whatever it is. But, or is there another subtext to this? And that's something that you can ask them about, are they like this with anyone else? And if not, why not? And kind of not necessarily pull them up on it, but approach that subject. Because I think, Marvin, that point that you made there is that for some men, they are shooting their shot. It might be a long shot. It might be a shot that's been building for a while, but that's how they see it.
Every man has done the long shot strategy. The original shot didn't work. It didn't land right. Or you found out they had a boyfriend and you were like, look, you're worth waiting 3 years in the long weeds to see if I might get a goal later on down the line. And in some senses, in the long weeds. And I think there's an element. There's an element of what the context is in the meeting. And so there's a difference when you meet people maybe in like a shared environment, like a church or in the work, versus like I met someone and he just hung around. I know, I was trying to be inclusive for
that shouldn't be happening
audience.
in church.
It should be happening in church. It should be happening in church. But I think what contextually is really important to say, like, how you meet really does start the conversation as well. And I think when you meet in a context, it might be slightly different. But when it's uncontextual, when you meet somewhere else and they just hang around, they're waiting to shoot their shot. And I think, you can set the boundaries verbally. And I think there is a question about men not honoring the word of women when they say what their boundaries is. But then I also consider the programming that men have had from a very young age is that when you get told no, ask differently. Like, it's not necessarily a no. And so it takes a really long time to actually listen to, I'm not in that place. Because the thing is, if it has worked once as well, it may have worked one time. You just kept on shooting your shot. And then one day they were like, okay. And then you're like, no, that's all I got to do. And you keep that programming. That actually happened to me once. Happened to me once when I was like in my early 20s, over 10 years ago. And this is my friend, and she was a very beautiful woman. And so I used to joke with her and be like, everyone thinks we're together anyway. We might as well just get together. If it doesn't work out with your guy, we'll just get together and have some kids, get married, blah, blah, blah. I used to always like drop these like slick lines about, what it's going to be. And like, if you really want some real, I'm being young and full of energy. And then one day she just put it on me. She goes, all right, come, let's go. And I was like, huh? Like,
you wasn't ready. You see, you wasn't ready.
I wasn't ready. It didn't work out. It was a very embarrassing story. But the point is that in that moment, now I've got data that potentially it may happen some point. So respecting those lines comes harder, but that's not okay. It just is a consequence of what may happen when you keep trying.
But also, can I just add, because Marvin mentioned before about men and their emotions and understanding their emotions and being able to be emotive. I remember under patriarchal society, you've been taught to hunt, like in terms of you going up to women and, it's all a sexual prowess and that sort of thing. But in terms of being, I had an event a few years back called He's Vulnerable When, which was to give space for black men to talk. And one of the men on the panel, I asked him, I said to him, when you were younger, you was a little bit of a bit of a dog. Like, why was you like that? And he said that, we're not taught to look for love. And he said, I had my first relationship. Then I met my child's mum. Then I got married. Now I'm divorced. Now I'm understanding myself and I want to choose love now. So I think sometimes as well, just in regards to Romantha, when people are having friendships, maybe those feelings develop over time where you realize, hold on a second, this right here is deep. Like, this person understands me on a deeper level, and then that builds an attraction. Or, and this has happened to me before, where I had a friend. It was one of those weird, I say weird evening, but Romantha, one of those evenings, we were doing a bit of work and randomly after 5 years, he tried to kiss me. I didn't understand what was going on. I slapped him. I said, get out, bruv. What are you doing? What kind of weirdness is this? Wow. But it took me a bit of time to realize what happened. And because I validated a lot of his ideas, like he's coming to me with business ideas. And I'm like, that's wicked. You could do this. You could do that. That's not what he's experienced before from his child's mum for these relationships. And then I realized, and I said to him, it's not me that you want. But it's this feeling. Now that you know that you need empowerment in terms of that sapiosexual, that mental stimulation. Now you know when you go out what you're looking for, that's part of what you want. But it's not me. Because I'd literally watch his eyes change after about 3 hours. And I'd be like, okay, after that time when he kissed me, I then said, okay, what's happening now? I can see it in your eyes. Is it because I've just been saying, building you up on this business aspect? But he didn't know how to empower his woman or the women he's with or whatever.
Can I introduce an idea though?
Yeah.
Is that no one listens to men's emotionally shits. No one pays attention to that shit. If we tell you we're going to take over the world and run a business, there's a lot more understanding and listening that goes along with it. If we tell you that we have feelings and emotions and we're hurt and stuff, people are just like, oh, you'll be fine. All you got to do is start getting these like Instagram quotable pep talks. And I think what happens then when you're truly validated emotionally as a man, like there is that affinity that you have. There is that connection that you have to the person that's providing it. Like I had this thing where like I was having feelings for my therapist at one point. And I was like, I know I don't have feelings for you like that, but you're genuinely helping me so much and providing such a valuable experience that I only know this positivity in the frequency of relationships and how to sexualize it. And I was like, right, that's really problematic, because then that means anyone that makes me feel like that, I have to sit there and question, like, do I love you? Are we together? Like, what's going on? Do you really see me as the person that I am? And I think that's the consequence of men being starved emotionally, is that then everything just must be programmed in that particular way. So, you know, when I think about, like, I'm quite fortunate. I probably have 3 very good female friends, and I'm able to speak to them really, really, like, deeply, authentically, without necessarily having to filter myself. But I think even then, there's always that lingering moment of just the power dynamic of men and women, and what could be misconstrued. Because, you know, I'm someone that's very, very intentional. It's like, yeah, we'll be friends tomorrow. I'll be like, yo, I like, you said some slick shit, and now we're friends. And I would just do that and be in your life, check in on you, how you doing. But, like, to some people, as a black man, I realized that my presence in that realm has to be managed better, because whereas I'm just like, yo, we're cool, man. What's going on? What you up to? Da, 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 da. They're like, are you trying to fuck me? Or what do you do? I think I love you. And, like, I'm creating this frequency with the intensity of just, like, normalizing exchange. I don't forget one time I met. I probably shouldn't say
You're telling on himself today. I love this. He's telling on himself.
No, but, like, you know, one of those things where you just, like, I was explaining the concept of platonic love, and I was reading about it, and just, like, what the depths of showing up for somebody without sexualizing it. And I was like, do you know what? That's so important, because often when people are challenged or something, it's used as a kind of backdoor to get access to something. But if I don't want anything, I don't need anything. I'm just doing it because I like who you are and who you're trying to be, and I've been there, so I'm connecting with you. And so I was talking this whole thing about platonic love, and then this person just stopped talking to me. They were just like, I was like, right, you're just gone. All right, cool, mate. Doesn't ring me anymore. And so I you know, for me, even understanding, like, trying to stand in that space, because this type of teaching for me is important. Like, can you normalize affinity, affection, without it being sexual, like with women? And it's like, otherwise you miss out on huge parts of perspective and an authentic experience of a different type of human being, because you don't allow that to nurture. It immediately has to be sexualized to be understood.
I think to add a balance, because it's important to add the balance, is that, remember, women play into this too. So as much as we talk a lot about, oh, you know, men, them making the move or whatever it is, women play into this whole concept of, if he's around me, you know, this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. They feed into the same thing. So I think it's about both sexes taking accountability. And I think it's about you as an individual. What do you want? What do you want? What is the community that you want to create around you? And I think for you, Marvin, what you said, you want to create a community that's balanced around you, and it's balanced for you and your wife, and both of you have a support network. Your friends are her support, and her friends become your support. I believe isn't that how I feel a marriage should be? Because if anything, if you have to go anywhere, be anywhere, or do anything, your friends will know a side to you that will be in support. You know what I mean? To your wife, there's going to be other aspects of how you talk to them and stuff like that. But I think it is on the individual, and I've been specific that this person's my brethren and I respect it. So let me meet your wife. I'm good friends with your wife. I spend time alone, you know, with your wife, and I'm an open book because of how much I value him and I value the relationship, and I want to be valued back. But you have to think about it. If you don't think about it, you'll be loose balling out here. You'll be getting yourself in all types of situations and be having to dodge and all that stuff. But I genuinely think about it, and where I'm at now, I'm like, I can't compromise. I don't care what someone said. I can't compromise. Like, I'd rather have you as my unconditional loving friend till the day I die, because I've got so much value from it. The only thing is just not sleeping together. Well, I can do without that. It's not that important. What's important is having people around you that's extended family as we grow. And 20 years on, we're gonna celebrate. Gosh, I've known you since 40. Or like Marvin's friends, he's known them since nursery. When you get to 50, 60, doesn't it become more golden, these friendships that you have with people, because they've extended this period of time of you growing emotionally.
It's for just for all of us, because we're going to wrap in a second. Like, in terms of the dynamic of, because we're kind of just speaking on at the moment, just some of our personal experiences and what we feel. But if you then had to like your belief system around men and women being friends in and out of relationships. What would your summation be about it being possible? How do you manage it in a healthy way? We'll start with Marv.
Thanks. I think one of the things is, where people say, like, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. I think that plays well into this kind of discussion, that you need to be a good judge of character. You need to be you need to have good self-awareness of yourself, kind of like what Chia was mentioning, and know yourself in different situations. And I think most importantly, and even what we've been doing in this podcast, we just need to listen. You need to listen to the opposite sex and not mansplain or not think you know better, but allow women to explain how they think and feel. And similarly, we do the same. We let them know where we're at, how we think and feel. It doesn't necessarily need to be right. It might just be where we're at in that moment, but it's to just speak freely. So I think that, for me, that's how I see the progression. The more, I think men now, and Marvin, as you touched on earlier, we're listening to women more than ever, more than we probably ever have done in the whole kind of history of humanity. And that needs to continue, because as you do that, you learn and you grow, and you're not afraid to be challenged or to have your behavior pointed out or to be pulled up on something, because you know it's going to improve you for the better. And I think similarly with women, as Chia mentioned at the start, was that, men have emotions and women are now more present to this. And the more that we can say things, I'm not going to mention people like Kevin Samuels, because that's a whole other conversation. But, but when men say things, there's a conversation to be had, and that needs to be listened to. And then you can explore and kind of, deconstruct that afterwards. But I think sometimes things just get shut down out the gate, and then there's no conversation. That means there's no growth, there's no development, there's no understanding. So I think the more that we listen, that's what I've been doing during this podcast. Sat down, listened to two black women explain their stories and learning from that. And that's something now I can pay forward when I speak to my friends and when I live out, my the rest of my days on this earth, it's going to be impacted by this experience today. So I think, that's what we need to do, a lot more of that.
What are your thoughts, Gia?
I think Marvin, he just wrapped that up, mate. I was just like, that's just beautiful. I agree with everything that you say. And like I said, the accountability is on both sides. And like I said, you have to be accountable for yourself. I can't be accountable for what anybody else's actions or they do, but I know that I have my moral codes. And if I say this isn't happening, it's just not happening. And so I act accordingly. Agree with you 100% on us listening. And it's the delivery, because you mentioned Kevin Samuels, so I'm just laughing. We're not going to go into it, but it's the delivery. Me and my male friends, we talk a lot about the delivery. It's not that we're saying that things that he said is not true, but it's the delivery, because we've all got feelings, right? And I think that we're at a place where men and women, we're tired of just hearing you, all you lot, this, that, and the other, because we know that it's far more complex than that. And getting into a place of respect, listening is respect. And also just to say thank you, because you saying that, I felt seen in this moment of you saying that I'm listening. I instantly felt seen and heard. And I've heard you guys' perspectives as well. But then that makes me have even more respect for my brothers, and why it's amazing to have brothers as your friends, because look at this beautiful stuff that we get to hear that we don't actually always talk about in a relationship. We wouldn't always have these types of conversations in the relationship. We seem to go this way, and that's why I think maybe I was going to go somewhere else. No, don't do it, Gia. Go on, yeah.
Romantha, what's your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that the conversations need to happen. I have learned from past experience that you don't simply cut someone off merely because you feel that there's different vibes and you feel that, it might go a certain way. It's important to have that conversation with your guy friends. I think we become so comfortable once we've set our boundaries that we forget that element of, he might just feel that I'm not ready for him to try now, so he's going to try next year. So I think for that, to feel that I'm not standing as women, have a little bit more understanding for that dynamic and just try. I mean, I've tried myself, but I think a lot of us are just impatient with men trying their luck and not wanting to understand our boundaries. And then secondly, I think even within relationships, we didn't even touch on that, but I think a discussion it's worth having a discussion. You mentioned earlier on that you put those people in situations with your romantic partners just so that you can see if there's any funny feelings, but that shouldn't warrant the reason for you to break off that friendship, because if a discussion is had about it, you might know that she picked up on some things that she said privately with you not there. And so I think even in relationships, I think in terms of setting boundaries with your romantic partner as well, it's important to make them understand this person's role in your life, what they mean to you. And then once you get to hear both sides of the story, your romantic partner's concerns and issues about this close friends, because we do know that some platonic relationships can get a little blurry. And so if your partner feels that your best friend coming over and sleeping in the spare room on a weekend is not, it doesn't make them comfortable, then you need to assess those kind of things. So it's an important conversation to have both with your partner and your friends, and for both sides to respect boundaries. I think that's important. If your partner doesn't want your best friend calling at 10 o'clock at night, maybe you should have a discussion about that. Don't make it bigger than the discussion.
Yeah, I think what's really nice about this is that I think, and maybe we should have a follow-up, because I think there's so much more to unpack between the male and female dynamic. I think it's really important that we get an update and share it with people. But I think what's really clear is that I think it's fundamentally important that you should be accessing different energies and genders when you're creating friendship circles, and you should be able to find a platonic way to do so. But I think it is a mixture of boundaries, but I think it's also just about being really, really honest and upfront. And I think ultimately what it is that sometimes, even if you can't if you do find someone really attractive, and you may be connected to them, so you may just want to be around that energy, knowing that you may not be able to have them. But then there may be a day when you're not as strong. It's not always a massive Machiavellian strategic 5-year plan. Sometimes it's like, I do love being around this person. They mean so much. And then in that particular day, you just feel like there's something there that you may have, created an opportunity for. And I think what we're trying to do is just make sure that we can have a conversation at that point, and that becomes the end of it. People, the idea of harassment is like more than once. Like if you shoot your shot, you shoot your shot. That was going to be like, absolutely not. And then at that point, it should be the end of it. But it doesn't deter you from creating those authentic connections or trying to. But I think where I think historically, usually men, but I think everybody has not really respected the boundary that's being created in terms of what's possible and what's not. And they've just waited in their wings for their own selfish needs. And I think you do need those friends, though. Guys, thank you so much. We've kind of slightly run over, but I do value us doing this. I do want to do this again because I think there's I'd like to have a conversation just about relationships in general, just like where are they now in the modern era? Because I think we've seen shifts, and like I don't even know what the balance of dynamics are, because I think I got my ideas of relationships from TV and film. So now we can't rely on Fresh Prince from 1990, even though Fresh Prince is pretty forward thinking. From 1990s, we have to figure out what does that actually look like from the beginning. So it'd be great to hopefully you'll come back and hang out with us to do this again. But I just want to thank you so much. We've had Marvin Crichlow, reoccurring my partner in life and crime and podcasting. We've had Chia come and join us, who's going to continue to hopefully reoccur and guide us spiritually. And we had Romantha from South Africa, who's the community lead for Dope Black Women South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.